webinar. Thank you for your attendance and for supporting our event. I'm sure you will benefit from the wealth of experience that the various speakers have, and we are very pleased and proud that they have all willingly given of their time to present to you over the next 2 days. If I can firstly thank the SASI National Office team of Ntabeleng and Mishka, who have done all the back office marketing and PR work relating to the summit, and to our technical support team at VTV, which is Refilware and Ndu. If you have any technical challenges, please do not hesitate to contact Refilware, whose details were given to you in the link. I'm sure you will agree that the topic of water loss and or management of our scarce water resource, not only in South Africa, but on the continent, is very important to us. And therefore, the message that most of the speakers will be bringing is how better to ensure that we save the precious resource that we have. I'm sure if you are all aware, as a webinar, obviously, we would like you to please keep your mics off and your cameras off. It does just help us with bandwidth. The sessions are being recorded, and SASI will ensure that the various sessions where we are legally allowed to do so are downloaded via our SASI TV channel on YouTube, and that means that you will have access to them. We will also deal with the various CPD points for both the EXA and the PRSI-NAT and the GIS related professions post the event. The event also has a number of polls which we have embedded into the different presentations. They are not only to ensure that you stay awake and concentrate, but also to provide feedback to the speakers on some of the aspects that they will be presenting to ensure that they can use that information for future events. With that being said, I trust you shall enjoy the event both days, and that you will participate in both the Q&A session and the panel sessions on both afternoons. And without much further ado, I'd like to introduce somebody who you should all know very well, which is Ronnie Mckenzie. Ronnie is going to do a basic introduction on the webinar whilst we ensure that the various speakers in the first sessions are available. Morning, Ronnie, and over to you. Thanks, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can all hear me loud and clear, and just like to thank Tom for the introduction and for SASI for setting everything up and for all their organization. I've looked at a lot of the delegates today. There's a lot of new names that I've never seen, never met before, and thank you for joining us. I hope you will find it interesting. And a lot of regulars. For those of you that don't know, this is the 9th IWA. IWA stands for the International Water Association, and it's the Water Loss Specialist Group. That is a group of individuals from around 200 countries around the world. I think we've got about 2,000 members, and we organize conferences every 2 years at different countries around the world. And in addition to the biennial conferences, we also try and organize regional conferences in different parts of the world where the local representatives of the water loss group put on events. And this is our 9th event here. It's the first time we've presented a virtual event, so hopefully it should go swimmingly. We'll see how it pans out. We do normally host it either in Johannesburg or Cape Town. And next year's event, we're hoping, will be a real event again once we can get rid of this COVID virus and start living a normal life again. So we will have an event hopefully in Cape Town next year. What are you missing in Cape Town? I'm going to just give you, particularly for those new attendees that have never been to our event, I just want to give you a feeling of what we've been doing over the past 9 years on these events, and previously we had 10 events before that which were not done through the IWA. So this is actually our 20th event, and we've been doing this regularly. Every year we try to touch on different aspects of water loss management, so that each year it's a slightly different conference. We select the topics, we select the speakers, we try and pull in some heavyweight speakers, and we try and give some of the younger up and coming professionals the opportunity to present what they're doing. So hopefully you'll find the blend of age and youngsters an interesting one. What are we missing in Cape? What we normally do, we normally hold these events at a conference centre in Cape Town. And you can see Cape Town, obviously, for those of you that have forgotten what it looks like over the past 2 years. Hopefully you will join us again next year in Cape Town. So I've got a few slides here just to show you roughly what Cape Town looks like for those that might have forgotten. It's got some of the most exciting scenery anywhere in the world. We can testify to that with our delegates, our international delegates. We've had 2 of the biennial conferences in Cape Town, and I'll touch on them in a little minute. But they were certainly rated amongst the best in the world as far as our world events are concerned. And part of that is just due to the stunning scenery and the variation of scenery that you get in the Cape. I don't think there's anything coming close to it that I know in anywhere else in the world. So I think we're quite lucky there. And next year we will move back to Cape Town. You've got some of the nicest, largest shopping centres in Africa. Maybe not in the world, but they certainly rank up there with shopping centres anywhere in the world. So if you bring your family down, they can have a nice time while you're at the conference, listening to presentations on water loss management. There's wineries you can go to. I think that's one of the key attractions of the Cape. We've got all the wineries. This is one where in our last conference we held some of the functions here, where we went to, I think this is Fairview, where they've got the goats, and you can go and watch the goats doing what goats do best, sort of climbing things and walking up stairs and over bridges. They've also got a lot of arts and science type things in Cape Town. This is one of the, I don't know how many of you have been to Cape Town recently. This is the waterfront, the Silos Museum in the waterfront. It was originally, historically, it was a grain silo where they used to bring the grain into the port of Cape Town and store the grain there, or take it away from there. And they've basically cut the inside of the silos out and created a huge void on the inside, which from an engineering point of view, it's really quite impressive and quite an interesting building. I think architecturally, it's one of the most impressive buildings I've seen. I think it's ranked one of the top 10 museums anywhere in the world. So if you go into this, if you're down in the Cape, I would definitely recommend that you go and see this. It's got some really unusual features within inside and lots of exhibits. This is a big dragon thing that meets you when you come in at the entrance. And they've got many rooms throughout this museum all over the place that have different exhibits, etc., art exhibits and all sorts of interesting forms of art. This is one that took my fancy. Coming from Glasgow, bricks are quite common there. So I saw an exhibit in the Silos Museum where they've basically got a pile of bricks hanging from the ceiling. I thought this is quite interesting. It's quite an economical one to do. I mean, most museums around the world are struggling for funds these days. So when they've got a big space and they've got no money to buy a painting or an artifact or something, they can just get a bit of string and hang a few bricks from the ceiling. Health and safety issues from an engineering point of view might be an issue here, I don't know, but it's certainly an exhibit that could be taken up by other museums, particularly in Scotland. I think the museums in Scotland could learn from this one. So if you're in Cape Town and you want to see a pile of bricks hanging from the ceiling, this is definitely one not to miss. So that's quite a good one. When we have our conference, I was in Seattle a few years ago, and I noticed at a big conference there where I was presenting something. They opened the conference with a competition, and everybody loved it. It was really very, very popular. People love competitions, and they had prizes, and I think they gave away some sort of super powerful laptop to someone that was worth $20,000 or something like that. And they gave away a 2-week holiday in Aspen where you could go skiing and all sorts of things. So when we do our conference in Cape Town, we don't like to sort of miss out on things like that. So we also have a competition. And those of you that were at the conference in 2018 will probably remember this, because we had the competition there, and we'll do the same again. So it's something to really look forward to. We had 3 prizes. One was a big Bentley car, which was in the foyer of the conference centre. And this is a picture of the Bentley that we had there. It was the first prize, actually. And it is a Scottish raffle, by the way, so you've got to bear that in mind. We had 3 prizes, and the raffle was for one of them. The second prize was a bottle of wine, and the third prize was a 2-week cruise on one of the Cunard ships. That used to be the second prize. But with COVID coming in, most people actually don't want to go on cruises these days and would rather sit at home and have a bottle of wine. So we moved the wine up to second prize. And it was actually the second prize was the one that won in this particular raffle. And it was audited by KPMG, so there was no messing about with the prize giving. So we'll do that again when we're down in Cape Town. We'll have 3 wonderful prizes, and someone in the group will win one of them. Okay, so just something to look forward to. It was interesting. We will be talking tomorrow. I think we'll be talking a bit more about Cape Town. But I wanted just to set the scene. We're talking about water losses, and we're talking about leakage and running out of water and catastrophe and all sorts of terrible things like that. So I did want to just prime you a little bit on Cape Town. I hope I'm not stealing too many of Peter Flower's slides from tomorrow. He will discuss it in lots of detail, but Peter's he's one of our keynote speakers who will be speaking tomorrow. He was the Director of Water and Sanitation for the City of Cape Town during their Day 0 crisis. So he had the unenviable task of taking the city through what was technically the worst drought in about 200 years. And whether you count this as climate change, as lots of people will say it's climate change, or whether you count it as natural drought events in an arid country or a semi-arid country. It doesn't actually matter. The fact is, droughts will happen, and they will get worse as life goes on. So Cape Town had a 1 in 200 year drought. And this graph is, to me, it's quite an interesting graph. It shows about 10 years of water demand for the city of Cape Town. You can see the nice cyclic pattern between summer and winter demand, which is typical for a town like Cape Town, which gets a lot of tourists during the summer period, which pushes the demand up, and it gets most of its rainfall in the winter. So the demand in winter is quite low. So you can see the high and the low demand periods. The black line represents the averaged demand spread every, say, a 12-month rolling average. So you can see what the average demand does. What's quite interesting is just before in 2015, when I was in America, in Seattle, I presented a slide similar to this, without the last 3 years, obviously. And I indicated that according to the cycles of dry seasons and droughts, the South African, particularly the Western Cape, is due for a particularly severe drought. And that was in July 2015. And needless to say, after that, 6 months later, the drought started in the Cape. And you can see the demand, that black line, diving down as the city of Cape Town implemented its water restrictions. Now, what happened over that three-year period? They had what they called their Day 0 crisis. And it was widely publicized that Cape Town was the first major city in the world to virtually run out of water. And it was in Sky News, CNN, Fox News. Basically, every major news channel in the world was running the Day 0 crisis in the Cape. So it was interesting also, we held our conference right at the point they were due to run out of water, which was something I'll touch on tomorrow when Peter's talking. We held a water loss conference in May when the water was, their Day 0 was supposed to hit in June. So we were a month before the official running out of water in Cape Town. So that made it quite an interesting conference, and lots of interesting things happened there. It's interesting to note that this is a picture of Peter Flower, who will be talking tomorrow. He probably won't mention too much. He's kind of modest that way. Cape Town is the only city in the world that has actually achieved close to a 50% reduction in water demand during a crisis without going on to intermittent supply. Now, that last piece is a very important issue, without going on to intermittent supply. So much so that we have we've created a session tomorrow just on the issue of intermittent supply and on Cape Town's Day 0. So tomorrow we'll be talking not only about what happened in Cape Town when it was running out of water, but also we've pulled in another speaker who will be talking about intermittent supply. Interestingly, Australia had a similar event probably back in about, probably about 10 years ago, where they had their own Day 0 crisis on the East Coast. That's Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, that coast in Australia. They managed to get their water demand down to 140 litres per person per day, averaged out over the whole of the city. Cape Town managed, I think Peter will correct me on this tomorrow, but I believe Cape Town managed to get down to about 115, which I don't think any other major city in the world has managed to do. So that's quite an achievement. And although a lot of people will criticize Cape Town for almost running out of water, if you get hit by a 1 in 200 year drought, there really isn't a huge amount you can do apart from try and find your way through it. Now, we will be talking a bit about the IWA, and there are a number of the IWA water loss group, our 2,000 members around the world. We try and talk about the 4 pillars of water losses. Many of you have attended these events in the past, so I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail today, but just for those of you that are new to this, or that this is your first event with an IWA water loss group, there are 4 key pillars for managing physical leakage within a water system. One of the pillars is analysing minimum night flows and checking up what's going on through the analysis of real logging results. I'll be talking about this more tomorrow, so I'm not going to go into that in detail. Managing the infrastructure and managing fixing leaks, etc., is another of the key pillars that you've got. You've got the economics of active leakage control. That is how often do you send people in to find leaks, etc., etc. And we've also got pressure management. And pressure management will be discussed this afternoon. We probably won't go into too much on all of the pillars, but we will talk about some of them during this event. When it comes to our conferences, the IWA, we've had conferences all around the world. You can see here, we had them in Cyprus, Lemessos, Halifax, Bucharest. Cape Town was in 2009. That was one of the bigger ones. And we had it in Cape Town again in 2018. So it went quite well. Now, what happens at these conferences, we normally have parallel sessions, and it's unfortunately in Cape Town, we found that although we had 500 delegates, we had 2 parallel sessions, and we rarely had more than 100 at each session. So we found that people were just ducking off and going sightseeing in Cape Town, which is fine. I mean, that's to be expected. It's a wonderful city. Unfortunately, some of the organisers, we found out that they weren't attending the conference. This is Stewart Hamilton. Now, Stewart will be talking after coffee this morning. Just remember, if you do duck out, if people check your Facebook and then you post pictures like this on your Facebook, then they know that you weren't at the conference. So you've got to be quite careful about that. And Stuart's punishment is that he's going to be presenting on leak detection after coffee today. So he's been called back. He is currently the chairman of the IWA. So Stewart has to set a good example. And it's not just Stewart that we found was playing truant at our conference. We also found Bambos was doing the same. This came off his Facebook page when he was supposed to be at the conference. He was out fishing. So Bambos is also, his punishment is to present on intermittent water supply tomorrow. So Bambos is also been playing truant at our conferences. So we'll hear from Bambos tomorrow. Bambos is also a former chair of the IWA Water Loss Specialist Group, and he was the chair of the IWA Intermittent Water Supply Specialist Group. So we've got some real heavyweights that are going to be talking to you over the next couple of days. We will talk on leakage performance indicators. Just to touch those, this is one of our usual. This is a ratio of spectators to workers. This is one of my favorites. I like this one. You can compare countries all around the world with this indicator. This is a really quite a good one. Ratio 3 is actually quite good. This one, here's 10. This is putting up a road sign. We had 10 spectators to every worker. Other indicators that we quite like, if we look at leakage, we like the Mike Muller Mercedes Index. We look at that one now and again. That leak there is equivalent to 1 Mercedes-Benz every month, or 12 Mercedes-Benzes in a year. This indicator is quite suitable when you're talking to politicians in particular, because they cannot. It's very hard to get an understanding of what 20 cubic meters an hour looks like. But if you tell people it's 12 Mercedes-Benzes a year, that immediately hits home, and it's quite a useful one. That so we'll have a look at that. We'll be talking about high-tech and low-tech leak detection. Stuart's going to talk about that after coffee. They're now finding leaks using satellites, apparently. So we'll discuss that one. Low-tech, they're now using sniffer dogs to find leaks. Now, I'm not joking. This is serious. They actually have serious dogs. That's a serious dog. It's sniffing out leaks in England and in the UK for United Utilities. We tried it in South Africa. We used 2 dogs. One was making sure the other one did its job properly there, and we had a big Rhodesian ridgeback. I don't know if you call it that anymore. Anyway, it's a ridgeback, and they thought they'd found a leak here. We tested that out. We tried to use dogs. Didn't actually work very well, but dogs are nice. It's a nice thing to have. Water wastage, just a couple of slides on water wastage before we hand over to our first major speaker. Irrigation is your biggest use of water in many municipalities. So if you do have a problem with water, or there's a shortage, or there's a pipe burst or something, ban irrigation immediately, and at least it will give you some breathing space. Don't irrigate pavements. That's not a good idea. That's just flaunting it. This was someone wasting water. They couldn't fix a tap at the back, so they put a hose pipe down a drain rather than spend £2 on a new washer. It was resulting in 200 kilolitres of water a month wastage. So there's lots of wastage going on in South Africa. Leak repairs, we won't touch on that at this event, but just a couple of pictures showing you some leak repairs that we've seen over the years. So it's quite an interesting one. Shows a lot of enthusiasm for plastic bags for leak repairs. Do you replace pipes, or do you just keep repairing them? There's a whole issue over replace or repair. We see cases like this. This is a case where you actually should replace the pipe, I would say. I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist to figure that one out. We're going to talk 2 days. Day 1, it will be, I'm just kicking off just to soften you up for our first speaker here. Jay Bachwan will be coming on in a minute. I'll introduce him just now. Stewart Hamilton will be after the break, and in the afternoon we've got speakers on pressure management who we'll introduce later on. So we've got a good lineup for you today. Tomorrow it's the same idea. We'll have Peter Flower on Cape Town. We'll have Bambos Charlambos on intermittent water supply, and we've got speakers then in the afternoon going to touch on various things, and we'll introduce them tomorrow lunchtime. Before I introduce Jay, I just want to, he has produced a position paper, which is quite a nice document, and I believe that will be made available to all delegates as a PDF. So just make sure you get a copy of that and have a read at that one. I think it's a very nice document. I'm going to be taking over to our first speaker, who's going to be Jay. Jay has got just over an hour to chat. We normally kick off with a status quo assessment on South Africa as to what is actually going on in the water sector in South Africa with regards to water losses. And Jay will be presenting that one right now. Jay is the executive manager for water use and waste management at the Water Research Commission. I was going through his CV. I decided I've trimmed it right down because he's only got an hour and a bit, and it would have taken me at least half an hour to go through it. So that's the problem with some of the speakers. They've got serious CVs, and Jay is one of them. Jay's got a BE in civil engineering from the University of Nagpur in India. He's got a GDE from the University of the Witwatersrand and an MSc from Leeds University in the UK on tropical health engineering. He has been with the WRC, I'm not absolutely sure from the CV. I think it must be at least 25 years, maybe 30. I think Jay can maybe answer that question. It can be his first question. He's been heavily involved in many research projects over the years and been involved in shaping national water policy and legislation in South Africa. He's been president of WISA, as well as chairperson of the Ministers' Advisory Committee for the Department of Water and Sanitation, as well as the international advisor to lots of different councils and organizations. It's like a list, it's a who's who type thing of different organizations. I just picked out 3 of them, including the IWA, Global Development Agency, and UNEP. His CV is too long to read out. It's enormous, and Jay's got lots and lots and lots of experience. So I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but we're lucky to have Jay giving us the first presentation, which is always a hard one. And I would like to, I'll stop talking now. You'll probably be happy to hear that. And I'm going to stop sharing and pass over to Jay. So this is where it gets tricky. So here we go. I'm going to stop sharing. And Jay, the floor is yours.
And thank you, Ronnie, for the opportunity for introducing, these 2 important days. I think, we can't lose our attention on water loss and non-revenue. So, my talk is about, for many years, we've been talking about the loss drops. I think we're in a space now where we should be talking about the disappearing drops, because it's become so invisible to many of us in the sector that it just keeps disappearing, and that's a huge concern. But, I want to start my talk, and people may not, agree with me, but this is my view, being in the sector for many, many years, that, water services in general across the sector is a growing national crisis. Okay, and I say that because the direction we are heading in, and for all the work we've done over the years is pointing in this direction, that the lack of operation and maintenance, the lack of attention to due diligence, business aspects of the water supply area is going to have a significant risk on our growth and economy. I mean, leave about load shedding. I mean, we invented this term water shedding. We're starting to see and hear more frequent, incidences of water being shut off, water not flowing, etc. And if it gets to a serious proportion, especially in our metros, which are the economic hub of this country, okay, it's going to have a significant risk to our growth and the economy, okay? And the consequence of that, it's going to have a huge impact on public and environmental health. And on the back of these kind of pandemics, I don't know if we'll have another one, but COVID is here to stay for a longer time. If water supply becomes a risk, the public and environmental health issues just go up, multifold in terms of fighting the pandemic. And if we persist on this pathway and direction, I think we will have more than a day zero. We'll have to, devise another term. Day zero was too easy. I think that is where, and what I'm going to share will start, relating to this manifestation of this crisis. But let me, as an introduction, in the amount of work we do, we also do kind of analysis of what's happening in the municipal water sector. And I've just chosen a few slides from a longer presentation around giving some context to, the Water Service Authority, as we call institutional business health. And, if you look at what's happening around the country till recently, that in general, there's extreme and high vulnerabilities, in WSAs that are tending to become dysfunctional in meeting their water services mandate. And you'll look around on this map, a lot of red, and a lot of the red areas are areas that were in the previous homelands, and they haven't been, nicely integrated into the broader, and that's where this issue of capacity and non-function, etc. But a lot of the metros and that are also starting to move into that zone. So
Jay, sorry to interrupt you. Could you possibly speak closer to your mic? There've been a few of the delegates have indicated you're sounding a little bit low there. So if you wouldn't mind shouting into your mic so that they can all hear you. Thanks, Jay. See if that's any better.
Is that much better?
Not much better. It's a little bit better.
Okay. I put on a microphone, so this is the best I can do. I will try and speak louder. If there's a problem, let me know. So this is where we're sitting in that, 40% of our WSAs, are in extreme business vulnerability. And I'm talking, when we talk, and I'll share with you, it's both financial, it's technical, and it's operational. Okay. 40% extreme and 38%, high vulnerability. That's close to 78% of our municipalities really moving into this dysfunctional zone. When you look at, what the big issues are in these municipalities, and they're not many. I mean, you can narrow it down. It's weak finances that, includes financial asset management, revenue collection, and general bookkeeping is in shambles. Okay. Of course, we keep fighting this agenda of, poor operation and maintenance of asset. So due to the attention that we move towards, and it's what we like in this industry, is to build new infrastructure. Okay. Possibly all the tender juice is there. We forget the attention to operation and maintenance. And this political interference starts right from the top. And it's a game that is played right down the system. And the attention is that these problems can only be solved by building new infrastructure. So, when we use the word tenderpreneurship, it's in that direction. We think that outside that, we cannot do anything else. So operation and maintenance is at huge risk in many of these municipalities. And because of that, you find that a lot of the technical capacity that are normally in these municipalities are driven out, so that the administrative nature of running big projects, takes precedence in many of these municipalities. So that's the other big area, is that the technical capacity and the competencies in these municipalities are also one of the causes around these vulnerabilities. When you look at more deeper, in terms of the questions we ask, 64% of WSAs that get consultants to draft this beautiful WSDPs never even implement it. It's just there on the shelf as a tick box, and I don't even think they know what is in there. It was just meant to meet one regulatory gap, but after that, the WSTP is not executed. Water conservation and demand management, and that's where even water loss sits in a big way. 58% of these municipalities don't even have a demand management strategy or plan. Okay, and they keep planning new projects, etc., like there's a whole lot of resources available in their vicinity. When it looks at the other side of wastewater treatment, 53% of many treatment plants are reaching capacity. And again, that's also because, the uncontrolled growth and not knowing where all of this ends up. 51% of drinking water treatment works are also reaching their capacity. Okay. And in this surveys, 44% of these municipalities that are problematic keep claiming water shortages, that they're running out of water. But when you really do the balances, etc., you'd find, and I'll show you later, that many of these municipalities sometimes lose about 80% of the water that enters their jurisdiction. Now, you can unpack this in a different way provincially also, and you'll see that the hotspots, around the country, again, the more rural-based municipalities, so Northwest, Northern Cape, Limpopo, Eastern Cape, and Free State is an anomaly because, again, it's got a lot of small mining towns, etc., that's adding to this dynamic. So, if you look at it, from that perspective, you see where a lot of the vulnerability sits at a provincial level in terms of the dynamics of this. Now, I introduced that because what the status quo is gives effect to one of the big problem areas, and that these 2 days are going to be about, and that is, water losses and non-revenue water. Because, in fact, it's an operation and maintenance issue. It's also an infrastructure management issue. Okay, and if we can deal with that meaningfully, we can knock a number of opportunistic areas in terms of the revenue side, in terms of the resource side, etc., and put a municipality in the direction that is more productive and conducive. So, water losses has been with us, for 20 odd years, from the time I joined the WRC. In a way, we were at the cutting edge, 20 years ago, where we already started to identify, the issue of water losses. And I remember finding a paper that was published, somewhere in the 1980s by an official in the city of Johannesburg that introduced the first principles of water loss management. It was in Afrikaans, of course. We had to translate it. But Ronnie has a copy of it, and he can share it with you all. That, in a way, we were pioneering the area of water losses, in the early 80s, etc. And there was various studies that the WRC kind of instigated towards that direction. So there's, early work by Malan, around looking at water consumptions and savings in apartment buildings, this whole suite of CSR work that looked at stuff in smaller households, in high income residences, etc. So we got a good understanding of what is happening at a domestic level in your bathroom, in your toilet, in your shower, in your kitchen, etc., as a benchmark. Then, moving into water losses, etc., we brought in the first kind of introductory scoping report around, how you analyze and look for water losses in distribution systems. And I remember the previous research manager, it was Charles something, etc., was one of the kind of passionate people that actually, spent several nights showing municipal officials how to go about finding, losses in the system using the water loss techniques that were evolving. And then we started to move into the area of understanding, what kind of equipment there was in the early 80s, etc., as well as, the issues of domestic meters and their influence and the fittings, etc., on this whole area of water losses. Okay, and that was then supported by a whole lot of asset management stuff of pipelines around, pipe leaks from different materials, including copper pipes, etc., in the domestic environment, and then, corrosion performance of non-metallic pipes and all sorts of stuff, and what coatings do, and etc. So there's a whole body of work that we had done to give context to how, water quality and chemical compositions and all kind of things, etc., influence leakages and the deterioration in pipe that relate to losses. Of lately, as we started to build the momentum and in the 90s, water conservation and demand management became one of the key platforms of the water sector. The Water Research Commission realized, to build capacity and innovation, and our response was threefold. One was developing a whole lot of aids and tools, focusing on asset management, and starting this national surveys around understanding water losses and non-revenue water. And early as 2005, we did a scoping study around, benchmarking leakage, and that was the kind of first pioneering work, and Ronnie was behind this in developing the framework around, using the knowledge that we had before and establishing this benchmarking platform. And we took 27 systems where we could access data from, mostly the metros and the bigger towns and cities. And we were able to test the framework and get an understanding of the kind of leakage in reticulation system. That gave us the confidence to launch a much larger initiative, and the first more wider assessment we did on non-revenue water came out in around January 2007, where we were able to tackle about 62 systems. And again, we were learning quite a lot while we were doing this, that data and information was scattered and not available, etc. In fact, it was really, like I said, an invisible problem for many, many people in working on this business. And I think the cutting edge of this work, came out in the April 2010 report, where we could get to about 150 municipalities, and we were able to give a national picture, that sent a very, very strong message on the state of non-revenue water, and we, came out there indicating, the average 34% non-revenue situation in the country as a whole, and the cost to the sector of about 8 billion rand per annum. So this was the beginnings of This was the beginnings of the foray into to non-revenue water and the attention to it. And over the years, we've been pioneering and developing a variety of tools and products to help capacitate the sector. And I think in 2011, this transition to where the Department of Water Affairs, started to lead on an annual basis the assessments, and that went on to culminate in the no drop process, which again disappeared in 2015, but continued in the background, by some very key people in the department that were passionate, and they maintained the momentum, but they could not release a lot of the data. So there is no drop reports for 2017, etc., 2018, but of course they never got the permission to be published by the department. So, not to be sexist, our attention, we like the model study, and we keeping it gender neutral. And our focus, and Ronnie talked about, and hopefully in the next 2 days, we'll go more into detail. The emphasis of tackling this non-revenue area was based around these 4 WRC models. And over the years, we've updated the software with the changing IT requirements, etc. And we're going to try to do it one more time, that we could make it digitally available in the future as an on-demand set of tools that people could continue to sharpen their own. But the 4 models that we found that could tackle the non-revenue area was SANFlow, which is your night flow analysis software. And it was simplified for any technical person in a municipality to read the guidelines and be able to go out and implement them. So SANFlow was your night flow analysis software. The EconoLeak was the modeling of an economic kind of approach to leak detection, and giving you the more cost-sensitive way to deal with it. And the bench leak was benchmarking losses within your system on your different zones, etc. So it could tell you what you're doing between the zones that can help you to improve the water loss systems, or also benchmark with your counterparts in other municipalities, and have this what we call horizontal learning approach, so that collectively people could tackle this. And then PRESMAC is the pressure management, which largely was pioneered in South Africa. And like I said, 15 years ago, or 10 years ago, this led to installation of some of the largest pressure management facilities in the world. And it's a platform we have not been able to harness in a meaningful way, in the country as a national intervention. It's just like membranes and direct reuse. We were pioneers around this in Windhoek and many other places, but as South Africa, we did not capitalize on using this innovation and technology at a national level, even at a municipal level, to our advantages. And then we put all of this together in some more advanced systems, and we integrated a lot of the software, and there's a version of Aqualite that is there that allows you to do a little bit more intelligence around the non-revenue water stuff. And then we went further around, creating a benchmarking system and an assessment system. So there's a water demand management scorecard that you can play around with by punching in a little bit of information, and it'll give you a scorecard around how you're doing as a municipality and where you should be focusing your attention. And then also, in the suite, there's additional tools on measuring the vulnerability of your network and your business. There's a risk management tool to say what's the likelihoods of this vulnerability emerging. And these are also available as complementary tools for municipal water services, technology practitioners, and they call water well and water risk. And some of the stuff I showed earlier emerges from what we've been doing in applying this to many municipal systems in terms of understanding vulnerability and risks of the water business. So straight into the 2011 results on non-revenue water. I'm not just taking a few slides out of it. We were able to get to 132 data sets of the potential 237 municipalities. But the important thing of 132 data sets is that they made up close to 85% of all the domestic water piped through South Africa. So it was all the big metros, all the big cities, all the big towns, etc., and a few rural municipalities of large sizes, etc., in that. And what we could see, and what we're seeing, that by tracking, from the first kind of studies we've done, we see that there was as the data improved and as the data sets improved, we were getting to an average of about 36.8% non-revenue water across the South African municipal sector, by June 2010. And that gives you the kind of domain we were operating as of 2010 as a sector. Okay, and that's the difference in what we're losing in terms of what is supplied by, we call it system input volume, against what is actually unaccounted and lost in the system. And we could disaggregate this into the different categories of municipalities. Your A's are your metros, the B1s and the B2s are the big towns and cities, and the B3s are the smaller towns, and the D4s are your district, district municipalities, etc. And you'd see that in the metros, the average non-revenue water was about 34.3% of systems input volume, and that in the B1s, which is your the secondary cities like Potch and Kimberley's and those kind of things, etc., an average of 41.3%, and then the smaller towns, around 30.5%, and if you look at this, even the rural towns, about 36.8%. But the concerning one was the rural municipalities, etc., where we saw averages of about 72.5%. Now, what this tells you as importance is that in the metros we have high value, low cost water because of the economies of scale. But in the rural areas we have high value, high cost water because of the complexities of transporting, and the spatial sort of settlement patterns in the rural areas, makes it more of a challenge as well to deal with. And this is just the extrapolation from the population and the input value and the non-revenue water average of 36.8%. That if you divide it with the population we have, we get to an average of about 235. But if you unpack that, it can be between 235 liters per capita. In the urban areas, 269. But that can go up to 400 liters per capita per day. We've done work in places like Kempton Park alone, and where we saw the average consumption of about 400 to 600 liters per capita per day. So, the averages are not, they're useful for a big population, but if you take it down to your, your district zone levels, and depending on the income brackets, etc., you find that the consumption patterns vary a lot. And that's a concern that we talk about, international benchmarks of 180 liters per capita per day. But, anywhere in our municipalities between Umhlanga and KwaMashu, it ranges from about 450, to 150 liters per capita per day. And that's a huge concern. And we worked out in 2010, the cost of this to the water sector. It was 7.2. I think by today, it could be now about 15 billion rand per annum or 20 billion, looking at the inflation and the rising cost of water. So, it's a big figure that we are losing, in the system. Again, we continued, with our work of, trying to close all the gaps around this non-revenue water. So we brought in, tools around meter management, which plays a significant part in measuring. And, there's several different guidelines we've taken on meter management and advanced meter management. So I'm going to now jump again now straight to the 2015-16 water balance. And this one I got from my colleagues at the Department of Water Affairs, under the Musa reporting. And in 2015-16, you'll see that the non-revenue water, increased to 41%. And if you go and have a look at what is happening, in many of these provinces on the 2015, you could see on average, we're looking at above 45% losses in the country. And that's a big problem, that we haven't been able to arrest this issue of non-revenue water significantly at a national level. So again, when you look at the system input volume on that data set, etc., you'll see that 70% of all the domestic water supplied in South Africa is going through the metro areas, and that's where the big opportunity sits in terms of tackling non-revenue water. Because if you can solve that one, then you can reduce this whole equation in a significant manner. And those are the volumes that are lost, 94.8 million cubic meters per annum in metros, compared to 3.37 million cubic meters per annum in very small rural municipalities and towns. So, it's magnitude of where do you put your bucks, where do you put your, full might in tackling this. And it should start with the A and B1 municipalities if you want to make a big difference and a dent into this. And you'll see that, the percentage increases, over time. And in this set, we did not include the rural areas because, like I said, it was 80% and growing. And many of the areas in rural areas don't even have water flowing in the infrastructure. So it's a different challenge. But you'll see that the liters per capita per day, kept increasing as well. Through the so people weren't becoming more efficient. They were beginning to use more water in the metro areas, etc. And that was the highlights. But the important graph or table is, looking at what's happening from 2010 to 2015. That, in the category A metro areas, etc., we are not seeing a decrease in non-revenue water. But the bigger concerns are in B1s, B2s, and B3s. That's your big towns and your satellite towns, that, the state of non-revenue water keeps increasing in these areas. And it's gone up in B3 from 37 to 52%. Okay, so those are, and B4s was 72%, and it's gone down to 49.6. But we know the B4 areas also have issues of security of supply, etc. So a lot of the areas into intermittent water supply, in most of the times of the year. So just the strategic aspect, like I said, Gauteng is the largest water user in the country, and with KZN and Western Cape accounting for 66% of the total demand. Okay, Gauteng and KZN account for 52% of the non-revenue water by volume. Limpopo has the highest percentage non-revenue water losses, but the lowest capacity per capita usage. Okay, Northern Cape has the highest ILI, and that tells you that they're not giving any attention to non-revenue water loss management. So, where we sit, the national average is 41%, and the liters per capita per day is around 233. Ronnie and them are the greater experts to say whether this is good or bad. I think it's an opportunity for us to use to turn this water business around. Otherwise, we're going to be in more dire straits. So in closing, over the time, some of my recommendations, etc., of learning what other people are doing, is that reducing, water losses starts with a proper perspective and understanding of distribution systems. Okay, that do not yet have permanent infrastructure monitoring for active leaks. And even the approach to evaluating such infrastructure requires a new perspective. So you can't start a water loss program without understanding the state of your infrastructure. So, you need to in parallel or initially start with condition assessment and understanding what the state of your infrastructure is. Okay. For operation and maintenance operation management and decision makers experiencing high water costs, real and apparent non-revenue water losses, as well as water scarcity and rapid growth, the need for change is obvious. Okay, but the cost of it is always going to raise concern. So you're stuck between this rock around that you need a lot of finances, and you need to deal with all these issues. Fortunately, affordable strategies for leak detection and repairs do not necessarily require all or nothing capital investment. Okay, water utilities can take a tiered approach to investing in solutions that will help them to identify and remediate their most, what you would say, urgent risks for real water losses first. So the idea is don't start with the complicated stuff that's going to, be difficult to deal with first. Take the low-hanging fruits first, okay, and use it incrementally to get to the point where you want to, where water loss management is an active and an integral part of the municipal systems for operation and maintenance. Then whatever the approach you use, the fundamental aspect of cost-effective leak detection and prioritization is having low-cost permanent sensing capabilities. So without this, we have all these capabilities nowadays. If we don't start introducing, these sensing capabilities, life will only be difficult going forward. So we should start as a matter of intervention with exploring these sensing capabilities that makes our work much more easier going forward. Then, the majority of the lakes, 70%, occur on your distribution lines, etc. And they're very small, you don't see them, and they can add up to a lot of real losses if they go undetected. So I think that's where a lot of attention needs to be put to. We shouldn't be pressurized by, customer complaints, etc. It's not an easy issue. It's a complex issue. Okay, and we should just keep focus around where our program is and what we are doing. is also to understand that once you fix a leak, it's not over. Leaks change over time. Okay, not all leaks deteriorate at the same pace as well. So having a good tracking system, on something you've done and fixed, what you've seen emerging is very, very key. Okay, because it can build in the intelligence for you to know where your risks are going to be next, etc. A more holistic approach can save, more than just the cost of water. A comprehensive approach to water operations management that focuses on improving infrastructure management and reducing the risk of liability and damage that is caused by leaks. So it's very important in parallel that asset management and condition assessment runs, with active leakage control and management. And then, getting to the root of the problem involves both structural and logistical considerations, related to the aging infrastructure, population growth, the pipeline materials, and many, many other operating conditions, which change over time that is not in your control. So it's getting to build the databases to say that, today we put a road over this pipe, or a township came over this pipe, or some electrical cable, so that you can always then use that to understand where you're going to have the potential risk emerging. There's lots of tools and products that are emerging in the market that we should start acquiring and using. There's a whole lot of stuff people will talk about, and each one has its advantages and disadvantages in terms of operational requirements and costs. You have to do the due diligence before you choose any of these products. I talked about the sensors and the transmitter units, because they give you a lot of capability for doing analytics, etc., as well as makes it more practical to collect and analyze leak detection data. And it's a more proactive way, to go, because the technology is becoming cheaper or more cost effective, but it solves a lot of the logistical issues that we had in the earlier days, where you went around with sounding and those kind of things. Yeah, and then there's a whole lot of other stuff. I don't know if I have time to go through this, but I'll leave it. It's in my presentation. And it's all about the dilemmas around repair versus replace. And like I said, the active leakage control with the condition assessment and infrastructure management will allow you to do that decision making much better. And even the decisions around what to do now and what to do later in a more systematic way. Okay, but the key of the story is prioritize the high value, high volume leaks immediately. Okay, that's the low hanging fruit. And then the parting shot is building the institutional capability and competency. Okay, it's a gap in the municipalities. Okay, not all pipeline engineers are water loss specialists. Okay, and not all drinking water supply people are water loss specialists. You have to build a new cohort of skills and capacity that needs to be institutionalized if you're really going to tackle this problem. And it's a message that needs to go to the treasury in many municipalities, because they expect you to do great things around managing the non-revenue issues, but they're not prepared to cut the slice of the budget in making that happen. So my parting shot, we need to be adaptive and have an adaptive capacity. And like I said, the 4R and the digital space continuously challenges our older ways of doing things. And we need to respond and harness this new age tools and products that are coming, more receptively, because I think that's where we need to adapt continuously in the space, and harness this benefit of smart water solutions that are out there to make our life much more easier, but to make non-revenue water much more easier and amenable to many, many municipalities. And it fits in to the broader thinking and approaches around building smarter cities for the future. And I think we should go in this direction in a meaningful way. So I'll stop there, Ronnie, and thank you all, for listening to me. And I hope it was useful to set the context for the next 2 days. Thank you, Ronnie.
Okay, thank you, Jay. That was most interesting, and while we allow the delegates to think up a couple of questions, we've got about 15 minutes that we can chat about what you've said. I would just like to, just before we take, there are a couple of questions which I've noted, which we'll come on to in a second. I just want to summarize basically what you've said there. Basically, in 2010, we had an estimate of non-revenue water in South Africa of about 37%. And at that point, I think the president at the time made it a key priority to reduce the water losses by half. That was what he said in his presidential speech. So in 2010, we wanted to reduce the water losses by half within the next 5 years. And in 2015, the percentage increased from 37 to 41. So it actually didn't get halved, it actually went up a bit. You indicated that was the last official assessment of water losses in South Africa. One of the questions I've got for you, and maybe you don't want to answer it in case, you can take the Fifth Amendment on this if you really want to. Have they done another assessment since 2015? And if so, has it gone up or down from 41%? Do you know? Don't you know? Or take the fifth, it's up to you. That's my first question. That's from me.
Okay. So look, of course, you need to give the president, certain credit for announcing, because it's, political statements sometimes, offer a platform of spiraling the attention at a municipal level. Okay. So the president was right. It was a national issue. He came out and he made the statement that the sector, and remember, the sector needed to work in addressing this problem, etc. And he set the ball in motion. But you can't blame him that we're in a situation. I think the sector is quite bad, quite wide. So we have to all collectively take blame, amongst the issues of governance and the poor governance that has played out during that period that did not allow us, to move in the direction of tackling it. Like I said, that if you look at the trajectory of municipal spend in that period towards operation and maintenance versus capital replacement and new capital, most of the money, 80% of the money was going into new infrastructure. Okay. Now, politically, that was also motivation to close the gap on previously the previous population that did not have access to water supply. So, operation and maintenance did fall on the wayside, and that's because of the poor governance that we keep hearing about, etc. But I think that we need to revive that commitment from the president again, that gives us a new impetus to raising the bar on non-revenue water. Since 2015, again, I can't answer for the Department of Water Affairs, Water and Sanitation, but all the regulatory platforms that we were having as an incentive in the sector, the blue drop, green drop, and the no drop, were withdrawn. For what reason, I can't give. So, even the teams in the department that were working on this their work was scaled down. A lot of this was done under the Musa project. And, after 2015-16, there might be ad hoc information that was there, but nothing has been consolidated into a reporting format. So the Musa data collection is there, and if allowed access to the data, possibly we could track what has happened till about 2018, etc., until that team has left the department and retired, etc. Beyond that, I'm hoping that the Musa platform is maintained because that's where the source of data is.
Okay, thanks, Jay. So there is some information on where we might be at the moment, but we're not putting it out into the open at the moment. But so, all right, okay, got that. I've got a question from Chabedi Tatsi. His question is, what are the water consumption patterns in households? And can you compare the patterns according to the category of settlement? So I'm assuming this question is geared at, where have we got where are the highest leakage problems inside households? Are they in the affluent households, or are they in the less affluent areas? Have we got a grip on that where we've got our biggest leakage problems? I'm assuming we're looking typically at internal plumbing leakage, as well as maybe irrigating big gardens and such like. Would you like to comment on that?
So the work that the CSR done, in the 80s on different settlement units. So, apartment blocks, low-income households, high-income households, etc. It was a very detailed, controlled study of understanding consumption patterns at different usage points in a household. So we have a good understanding as a baseline to benchmark, what the different consumption patterns ideally should, and it was a big data set that they did. So that it's not an easy study to do. We followed that up with the University of Stellenbosch, where they've used some very smart meters to estimate on demand kind of calculations of consumption at a household, and using the smart sensors, we could pick up signature usage of a flush or a shower or a kitchen use, etc. So it is there, and we do have those benchmarks, etc. And it tells us, at a household level, what we should be expecting ideally, because there's always going to be losses, okay? But there's an acceptable limit that we work within the municipal business, and it's been a practice for some time, that, up to 5% losses is acceptable, because of meter errors, because of, slow leakages or some kind of stuff, etc. But anything above that is unacceptable. Okay, so there are lots of records. I'm not even bringing Soweto into the equation, because Soweto was an different example that was there. But there's lots of information, lots of useful information on this at a household level. And what happens from international literature and experience is that consumption patterns flatten out. I mean, people that have been showering for 20 years don't change their showering habits. I mean, if you're a 10-minute showerer, you'll remain a 10-minute showerer. It doesn't go up to half an hour and very erratic, etc. So that information is logged and calculated globally as well as in South Africa. Because of our socioeconomic conditions, we can identify what a metered household will behave in terms of consumption. We cannot say that for unmetered households because we cannot control those kind of things, etc. But in all metered households, we can give you good figures on the consumption of an ideal household. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I've got two more questions that I'll read together that you can think about. The first one is from Anton. Thank you. Thank you to everyone that's actually asking questions, by the way. I won't repeat that. The preferred thinking styles of has any research been carried out, particularly using psychology and psychologists to look into the thinking styles of the consumers with regards to their water consumption? So that's it actually touches on the thing that you just said there about people having a shower. If they use a half hour, if they've been having a half-hour shower for most of their life, are they going to change now to a 2-minute shower? Has any research been done looking into the psychology of water use? So that's quite a high-level question. And the other one from Emmanuel is you've been touching mainly on physical losses, as in real losses. What is happening in South Africa with regards to commercial losses? Do you have a handle on that at the moment, or do you have anything you want to say? So there's two questions there. The first one is about psychology, and do we need to get people to change their mindsets and bring in psychologists to help us here? Have you done any research? And the other one is on commercial losses. Over to you, Jay.
Yeah, so the behavior patterns on water use, there's a lot of work done, by researchers in the social science domain that, globally and locally, that relate to the state of water. So it depends that, where you have, and there's a piece of study that has been done by, I think it's University of Witwatersrand, etc., in an area where there's high assurance of water supply, okay, and people do not connect to the value of water in a significant way. What they connect to is the high value of supply, because that is what the context has been. People then they behave according to that, and the cost of water. So we've done work on contingent evaluation, etc., and the contingent studies techniques also give you this whole understanding of how people are relating to water, but how people are relating to the cost of water as well, in terms of. So it's a very deeper, and recently we've started to experiment with behavioral economics as a mechanism of understanding user patterns and user behavior around water. And fortunately, we're able to bring this in as a technique during the Cape Town crisis. And, Cape Town allowed us to introduce some of the techniques around behavioral economics. And it works on a bidirectional communication pattern that puts more power of the information in the hands of the individuals. And the technique allows people then having information to change their behavior. So yes, this work has been done, but more work needs to be done, in South Africa because of our diversity and our different social dynamics in understanding that. But also, at a national level, this is my view, is that we don't have a connection with the value of water. Okay, those of us that have water supply, where it comes from, how it is manufactured and supplied is invisible to us. So, you had to live through Cape Town to really understand the value of water. And I think the experience from Cape Town is something that should be a national initiative around getting people to value water, because next in line is Gauteng. Okay, and people in Gauteng thinks that we have all these super pipelines, from that's going to give us an infinite supply of water, both officials and the users. but Gauteng is more vulnerable than the municipalities on the coastal areas, etc. So building the value of water right across, the sector, including the planners, the officials, etc., is very, very key, because it will change your perspective of how you manage it going forward. Ronnie, I think I've answered that question.
Okay, thank you, Jay. There's a question that I'm actually going to pass over to the workshop this afternoon by, is it Zwem, in connection with the level of service that is supplied by the Department of Water Affairs to specific communities. And I think that's a question. So if you don't mind, I won't ask that question just now. I'll use that as one of the panel questions at the end of today. So don't think I'm ignoring your question here. I'm trying to pick up questions in the question and answer as well as in the chat log. So I will cover that one. Do we have interventions as a country that we are implementing in reducing the agricultural water consumption? There's a quick question you could ask there. Jay, do you want to mention anything about the agricultural? We're not really touching on that on this conference to a large extent, but maybe you can throw a couple of words on that.
So there was a question from someone from Malawi on the commercial losses. Yes, most of our focus has been on domestic, but I think there's many people in the audience, including Ronnie and etc., and some of the municipalities that can highlight the commercial losses, which are also a very big problem area. I don't have any data on that to share, but maybe later on, Ronnie and them can cover that aspect.
All right. Okay.
On the issue of agricultural water consumption, the perception that always create in South Africa is that agriculture is a big user of water. Yes, it is. But, when you unpack that 60% water use in agriculture, of that 60%, about 15 to 20% is irrigated agriculture. The rest of it is dry land irrigation, okay? And many of these dry land practices and the irrigated agricultural sector are very, very efficient because they know the value of the water, etc. They're not over-exploiting, what is there. They use, and we have a big focus in the WRC. In fact, we've developed several tools like the wetting front detector and the scheduling programs that are internationally recognized and used in the Valhards. And we've demonstrated 50% efficiency in agriculture, and this continues to be widened and used in the country. So a lot of the formal commercial industries, commercial agricultural industry in South Africa are fortunately very, very efficient in their water use because of the allocation limitations that are there in terms of their licensing, etc., and they value that water going forward. But we have lots of information on our website that you can download, and many of the other things that I've been talking about is all freely available, from the WRC website.
Okay. Thank you, Jay. I think I'll throw in one. There's a whole bunch of questions that we won't get to just now. We'll try and carry them over till this afternoon. One from Kerry here, which I think is quite an interesting one that you might want to think of as a research project. We are currently discussing non-revenue water, which is effectively the real losses or physical leakage, as well as the apparent losses, which are the commercial losses, meter error, etc. In that calculation, using the IWA water balance, the key element in that is the revenue water, which is the water that is billed by the different municipalities and metros. Kerry's question, which I think is a very important one, is Of that revenue water, which is effectively the bills that are sent out by the billing departments, how much is ever paid? And has any research actually taken that into account in this whole, we're assuming 60% is revenue water. Of that 60%, how much is actually ever paid for? And is a lot of it being written off? And if it's being written off, should that then not be added to the non-revenue water? It might be a much worse situation than we think. Comments, Jay?
Yeah, so I think, the question is about, debt management in municipalities. And, it's a different subject area, and people are quite aware of the outstanding debt. I mean, the water debt is running into billions of rands, okay, that is owned to water boards and owed to municipalities from different sectors. So it's hard to relate the water, the debt issues to the water loss equation. Okay, they're related, but what we're saying is that we can account for, so much of revenue-based water. Sending out the bill is being done, but collecting the money is a different, because in many municipalities, it's two different departments. It's not the same department. Okay, so we've got few references on non-payment and debt management issues, but I think COCTA and Salga has put out detailed reports on the issue of debts in different municipal services sectors in terms of outstanding bills and 60 days and 120 days, etc. I don't have those figures, but you can find the the water the water services debt component reported monthly and annually to Treasury as a benchmark that is happening. I can dig it out, but I do have figures somewhere, but I don't have it off my head what the percentage is, because it goes up and down in the system.
Okay, thank you, Jay. I think the point Kerry was trying to put forward here is that there's and you also just mentioned it, you've got the two different departments within the water utilities, and they don't talk to each other, and each of them has their own bonus structure for performance basis, and the billing department is trying to put out as many bills as they possibly can, and in many cases, particularly in lower income areas, if there's very high leakage, those bills can be astronomical, and they know that they'll never get paid, in which case it's technically it could be considered part of the non-revenue water. So anyway, I think on that point, I think we'll take a break now. Let everyone, you can have as much tea and coffee and biscuits as you want during this break, with it being a virtual event, so knock yourself out there. Please come back at 11 o'clock. We're going to kick off at 11 o'clock with Stewart Hamilton. So you've got about 20 minutes, 22 minutes or so. That should be enough time to get a cup of coffee. Thank you for your presentation, Jay. We appreciated that. And
yeah, so just Ronnie, just to say, all the information is freely available on the WRC website. Whatever I've commented on meter management, on behavior change and all that kind of stuff. If you need more information, please reach out to me. We'll try and help anyone requiring more information.